So I am Nancy Broughton Munson from Elk Grove Village Public Library, and this was originally scheduled to be a live in-person program
Nice.
at the library for National Bike Month, and we've had Dave at the library before. Really great to have have the Friends of Cycling programs at the library. This particular program was done a couple years ago, was it?
Yeah, it is.
And
Yep.
a very good program that time. So we're happy to have him back again. And not only is, just in case there's anybody out there who doesn't know Dave already, but Dave is president of the Friends of Cycling in Elk Grove, which has been around for like 9 years.
9 years, yeah.
And now also the executive director of Ride Illinois, which is like statewide promotion advocacy for bicycling. So
exactly, yeah.
So I'll let you take it away now, Dave, and I will be here to help kind of facilitate questions. So please raise your hand or type your question in the chat area if you have a question, and Dave will be able to answer it.
Great.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Nancy. Welcome, everyone. It's Monday, I think. I think we're all losing track of the days, but last I checked, it's Monday. So tonight's discussion and webinar is going to be it's curriculum that was developed by the League of American Bicyclists, and this particular curriculum focuses on becoming a bike-friendly driver. So, a lot of their education programs focus on the cyclist. The idea behind this program is to focus on drivers and what drivers can do, motorists can do to share the road and then drive safely near bicyclists. So I'm going to jump right in here. A few thank yous. You'll see the League of American Bicyclists logo splashed all over this presentation. Again, it is something that they developed, and it was also a lot of this content comes from Fort Collins, Colorado. They're the ones that kind of built out the core of the program. Nancy mentioned Ride Illinois, so that's our statewide advocacy organization. I am fortunate enough to be the executive director of that nonprofit. Friends of Cycling in Elk Grove, this is taking place through the Elk Grove Public Library. So that's the local organization. And then Nancy and the Elk Grove Village Public Library are kind enough to, I think we pivoted, right? We went from in-person to a webinar. So yeah, all the organizations that are supporting this program tonight. Just a quick word about Ride Illinois. Shameless plug. Just some of the things that Ride Illinois is doing for cyclists in the state. So focusing on bike-friendly roads and education and legislation and things like that. Do check out our website, rideillinois.org. There's lots of great information there. In the end, the goal is to make biking better for everyone in Illinois who rides a bike. So what we're going to cover tonight, there's a lot of information in here. Some of the slides have more words than I'm typically comfortable with, so don't worry, I won't read verbatim, but we're going to cover a lot of topics. And what I'd like everyone to do is, if you're a cyclist, most cyclists are also motorists, but put yourself in the mindset of a motorist. I think we should frame it that way. So that's kind of the way you're thinking as we go through some of this information. There are a couple poll questions we'll be asking you to chime in with as well. So just want to set that mindset that, assume you're in your car and you're encountering cyclists while you're out driving. So aside from rules of the road, we'll touch a little bit on infrastructure and some bike-specific infrastructure. The term taking the lane, which tends to get people's blood boiling, as you'll see in just a little bit. We'll talk about crashes, common bike car crashes and how they can be avoided. We'll also talk briefly about the League of American Bicyclists, the programs and the education that they do geared towards cyclists. We'll wrap up with a sample question from Ride Illinois' bike safety quiz. And then of course we'll take your questions, but please don't hesitate. Ask your questions along the way, and Nancy, do interrupt or interject as we go along.
Well, I'll stop you right there then, Dave, because you mentioned cager mentality. I don't know what that is.
What is it? Cager mentality?
Mentality.
I
You know
don't know
what
if
it is?
I've heard that term either. This is from Matthew. I assume this has to do with being in a metal cage. Is that right, Matthew? And maybe um, I don't know, the
Yeah,
perceived
if you want to send a message and okay. Oh, it's
how
how
car
car
people
people
think.
think.
Okay. Hey, hey, Matthew, I've already learned something new. I'll look that up afterwards. So thank you for that. All right. So, Nancy, I believe this is our first poll question.
Okay.
And it'll be set up. So we just want to get a sense of who the audience is and how folks get around. So if you could.
Okay, so here's a question for you. So go ahead and mark it, all that apply.
There's no right or wrong answer.
Okay, it looks like everybody's voted now. So let's see the results. So it looks like.
Are you able to share? I think you can
Oh,
share.
I'm sorry.
Those,
Yes.
right?
There you go.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. All right. So yeah, we've got folks that walk and bike and drive. Public transit, I'm not surprised that that's a little bit lower, just because that's more popular in urban areas. So the nice thing is that the folks on the call tonight do get around multiple ways, right? And that, again, going back to that mindset, I think that's going to be helpful. And because you get around in various ways, you probably already have some empathy for others, or some understanding of those that choose to get around not in a car. Great, thank you. Let me just, all right, so I had to share this. This is an actual post, a comment. Someone shared one of Ride Illinois' recent digital ads, and it was specifically, this one was actually specifically about blind spots, yet he chose to share this and say, if you're in the middle of any lane with a sidewalk next to you, I'm going to make sure I hit you fast enough to fling your body on the misspelled, but sidewalk. So the point being is, there's some angry people out there, and Nancy and I were chatting prior to this about some of the comments we're getting on our digital ads, and all the more reason to try to educate people, not only what motorists can do, but things that bicyclists can do as well to avoid some crashes and that. So this was just one of those mind benders that I don't know what the mentality is, but I'm not going to solve that on Facebook. And what we want to share, and this is a great campaign, this was actually from Fort Collins, is that we're all people. So you'll see throughout this presentation that I'm not going to talk about bikes and cars. We're going to talk about bicyclists and motorists, okay? And to humanize a conversation or a comment, if it's on social media, whatever it is, if you can humanize it, that seems to take the edge off, because as these ads explain, we're all people. I can't read the text, but the guy on the left is, perhaps he's your dentist, but he's also a cyclist. And the woman in the middle is, a school teacher, but she's also a cyclist. So that's kind of the concept here, is that we're not vehicles, we're not, we're not metal, we're human beings, and we should respect each other.
How long was that campaign? Was it recent, or it's
these were from a couple years ago. Yeah, I don't know how recent. I'm gonna say in the last 3 or 4 years. All right, so let's talk just a bit about the Illinois rules of the road. I assume everyone here is from Illinois, but first thing we want to talk about is the laws that pertain to motorists and the things that motorists can do to drive safely around cyclists. I think most folks now are familiar with the 3 feet law, right? And the fact that motorists should give cyclists 3 feet of passing. That's pretty well known. There's a newer law, and there's a graphic later on that you'll see that motorists can pass cyclists even in a no passing zone. So when there's a double yellow, that is not necessarily a double yellow leading uphill, but on a double yellow on a flat, they can now pass a cyclist without the concern of, getting pulled over. We don't want to drive recklessly around cyclists. Bike lanes, that especially in Chicago, that's it's a hot topic because there's a lot of folks parking in the bike lanes, so we want to try to avoid that. And then if as a cyclist, you think of all bicyclists and motorists as vehicles and do the same as a motorist, that again tends to help frame the conversation that we're all, everyone's out there getting around, and we all have the right to the road. So I'm going to yield the right of way. And then for cyclists, the word practicable, which in and of itself is a tongue twister. That doesn't mean you have to ride as close to the curb as possible. It's as close to the curb as you can while, avoiding debris, avoiding the gutter, avoiding sewer grates, and then safely travel in a lane of traffic. So practicable is kind of a distinct term. The dead red stoplight law, and something else that might tend to raise the blood pressure of motorists. But in Illinois, if you as a cyclist come to a red light and have no means of tripping that light, meaning there's no sensor or your bike doesn't trigger the loop detector, you can pass through that red light when it's safe to do so. Most people say it's up for interpretation, but most will say if you wait 120 seconds or 2 minutes. We're going to yield to pedestrians on sidewalks and trails. We can't expect accommodations or sympathy or space when we're on the road and then go hop on a trail or on a sidewalk and then kind of be that bully. We know that we can ride side by side as long as the reasonable flow of traffic is not impeded. So that's another left up for interpretation, but riding two abreast or side by side is permitted. And then traveling in the same direction and then using a white light and a rear red reflector or light. And we want to be visible at night. So that's just the way the law is written to accommodate cyclists, and then the slide prior to accommodate motorists as well. All right, so what does it mean to share the road, right? That's one of those campaigns that have been around for quite some time. As long as I've been involved in advocacy, Share the Road has been kind of a pledge or a plea by cyclists. So the important thing to note is that in Illinois, according to the Illinois Vehicle Code, a bicycle is classified as a vehicle. So that means a cyclist is going to have many of the same rights and responsibilities as motorists have. So there's things that you should do as a cyclist, and oftentimes I'll get someone, whether it's in a class or in conversationals, they'll start describing this scenario. So the motorist was here and I was here, and then they'll say, well, what should I have done? And 95 times out of 100, the answer is going to be, well, what would you have done if you were driving? And then you get that, oh, okay. So that works for a cyclist, but again, from a motorist standpoint, it should be the same thing. You see a cyclist in front of you, what would you do if there was a car in front of you, right? You should treat it the same way. What League of American Bicyclists teaches is the smart cycling philosophy, and that says that cyclists fare best when they act and are treated as drivers of vehicles. They do things that a driver of a motor vehicle would expect another motor vehicle to do. So they're predictable. They're not doing things that the motorist doesn't expect.
So if you're coming up to like a red light and there's a couple cars already there, you would want to stop behind them, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, it's another thing that really irks motorists, and it's unsafe at the same time. So unless there's a facility, a bike box there to allow you to move in front of traffic, you should take your place in line. Exactly. All right, so just some infrastructure that that is built for cyclists, right? And some of these things we'll see in the Chicago area and other parts of Illinois, and some you may not see here, but you may have seen, when you're on vacation and things like that. So I mentioned the bike box earlier. This is a great example. I think I can use this little pointer. So what this does is allow a cyclist to pass on the right and then take the place at the front of the line of traffic. These tend to be on lower speed streets, highly traveled streets. This also will discourage a motorist from making a right turn in front of a cyclist. So this is pretty popular. I know Portland has kind of started the bike box concept and starting to see them more and more, but that's what the purpose is there. Trail crossings, this is actually from Elk Grove, coming out of Bussey Woods. So we have specific pedestrian buttons when exiting a trail onto a roadway. Sharrows, I know Sarah's on the call, and Sarah and the kids just love that term. But the idea behind a sharrow is it shows a cyclist, well, it does two things. It communicates to a motorist that they may encounter cyclists on that stretch of road, that it's typically a designated bike route, but also gives the cyclist some idea of where they should ride. So in this example, the sharrow is further out in the middle of the lane because you could see the cars up ahead, and by riding a little further out, we're avoiding any potential dooring incidents. The motorist would open up a door and the cyclist would run into it. So effective and inexpensive. And then the bike signals, yet another example. Directional paint just shows cyclists where to ride. So in this case, it's out along a curve. And I expect all of you to be riding with your dog and your cargo bike here soon. So yeah, it shows the cyclist where to go. Side path. So here's a good example. This is up by Woodfield Mall. So separated from the roadway, tends to make cyclists feel a little safer because they're not on the roadway. Protected bike lanes, and there's all sorts of those. We won't go into all those details, but there's spacing between the bike lane itself and a travel lane or a parking lane. And then this is actually another Elk Grove example where this paint is meant to show the cyclist where to stop in order to trip the light. So just some accommodations that make it a little bit easier. So when you see these things when you're out driving, they're good indications that you may encounter a cyclist along the stretch that you're on. All right. So let me just make sure I'm getting all the notes that I wanted to touch on. Just some more examples here. The only one I'm going to point out, the ones on the right here. So contraflow lanes. So those show that a cyclist can go against the flow of traffic. Typically, these are going to be on one-way streets. I know, for example, there are some in Rogers Park near where my daughter goes to school, where there's just not another way for a cyclist to go a particular direction. So the exception is made. And it is clearly pointed out, as you can see with the paint here, that the cyclist can go against the flow of traffic. So that's an important example. All right, let's talk crashes, because really what we want to do is avoid crashes. I can't imagine anyone on the call is looking to get in a crash with another car or with the cyclist. So this data is from 2012. The local data is from 2012. So, you can see from a legal standpoint, who's at fault. So, a little more than half the time, the motorists are at fault. Intersections are always going to be a dangerous place in a car as well as on a bike. So you want to pay particular attention and when going through intersections, especially if you're in an area that has a lot of cyclists. And unfortunately, a lot are hit and run, so that's certainly not good. For the motorists, so failure to yield. So whether that's, and you'll see later on, a right hook or a left cross or something to that effect, that's very common. And I want to point out the riding against traffic. There was a period of time, it seems, where parents taught their kids to ride against traffic. And so in my observations, it seems to be folks of a certain age that I see riding against traffic more than others. That's the number one reason for crashes. Motorists simply don't expect to see a cyclist coming at them against traffic. So do keep that in mind and pay particular attention again at intersections. And guys, come on, we're involved in 64% of the crashes. So again, this is data. I mean, it is what it is. But pulled out a few highlights. And then nationally, and this is something I've spoken to over the years in teaching classes, that half the time it's a cyclist's fault, half the time it's the motorist's fault. Let's just throw that all out. Let's figure out, yeah, something could have been done differently, but in an argument or a conversation, you can't say it's always the cyclist. It's always, no, it's 50-50. So now let's do things as cyclists and motorists to avoid those incidents and those crashes. And then just a plug for helmets. Helmets will help if you happen to hit your head or something hits you in the head. So we do, of course, want to encourage folks to wear helmets. That'll certainly help. So the takeaway, as I mentioned, is that in most crashes, right, both people involved could have done something differently. That's kind of what I want to know. So especially when it comes to, a bike and a car, where the cyclist is going to be at a much greater risk of injury, we want to try to avoid those, right? So what we're going to do for the next few slides is just talk about how to avoid some of the common mistakes that motorists make that lead to crashes with cyclists. Nancy, any questions or comments you wanted to call out?
Yeah, so Tammy asks when new data will come out to find out what the new numbers are.
Yeah, you know what, Tammy, there probably is. I can check with CDOT and see if they have some new figures. Of course, it tends to lag by a few years, but I'm going to guess that there is more recent data than 2012. I can check with the actually the CDOT, the Chicago Vision Zero team. Let me just jot that down.
I have to say, personally, I think that riding against traffic is got to be one of the biggest misconceptions that cyclists have, or casual cyclists, maybe new to cycling or something, but right. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's startling if you're in a car and all of a sudden there's someone where you don't expect them to be. Mm-hmm. All right, so question, and you guys can put this in the chat if you want. You can, talk to yourself. You can holler it out. But the idea here is this woman is riding in a bike lane, appears to be that it's not a contraflow bike lane. So if you're paying attention a couple minutes earlier, is what this woman is doing legal or not, given that it appears the traffic is going the opposite way? All right, we got an illegal from Matthew, right? And yeah, it's not, right? The idea is that as a cyclist, you should be going in the same direction as traffic. So that was a gimme. All right, oh, there was the knot circle that came up. Okay. All right, so here's another common crash. So any right angle. In this case, you see that the cyclist is riding against the flow of traffic. And so now if this motorist is looking to make a right turn, is he or she expecting to see a cyclist there? And just not the case. So yet another reason. So in this is like the worst case scenario. It's at an intersection. The cyclist is riding against the flow of traffic, and the motorist is making a right turn, which means oftentimes they're just looking to the left to make sure there's no traffic coming through this way. Right? There's been some stats out lately that touch on that. It's quite a few. I think the majority of motorists, tend to look just to the left to make sure it's clear. So all sorts of bad things can happen in that situation. And now, hopefully you guys can see this well enough. This is in a parking lot, and the cyclist here is traveling eastbound. Not that it really matters. Well, I guess we have our compass rose, but again, riding against traffic. The motorist is just, coming out, they're done with their shopping or whatever, and they're looking to make a right-hand turn, which, going back to the other diagram, is very similar, right? So this seems a little dramatic, but the bicycle slammed into the windshield of the motor vehicle, right? And the result was, I don't know if this is stock photography or actually from that incident. So the idea is, well, what could be done differently there? And again, ride with the flow of traffic, not only from a visibility standpoint, but also from an impact standpoint. The cyclists, if a cyclist and motorist hit head on, there's more force, greater chance of injury. So yet another reason to ride with traffic. And then, yeah, I mean, the motorist should look all ways, right? You can't deny that the cyclist was in the wrong here from a legal standpoint, but at the same point, you don't really want to be in that situation, right? So perhaps taking an extra second to just make sure both directions are clear could have avoided that situation. All right, so now I want to jump to, again, a term that tends to make motorists' blood boil. But I'm just curious, familiarity with the term taking the lane, maybe just use the chat, if that's something you're familiar with, or especially if you're not familiar with it. I want to make sure that, all right, so Tammy is not familiar, good. All right, so looks like we have a mix. And BL says hi. Hi, BL. All right.
A question too. It sort of fits in with this too, but if you want to.
Oh, okay. Is the motorist generally found liable whether accident is their fault or the cyclist's fault? I can't say for sure, Barb. It's going to depend on the traffic or the report that is filed. We're fortunate to have Brendan Kevinitis, one of our sponsors, and he did a bike law session. And the point he made in that session, and this is a webinar you could go back and watch if you'd like, is that it's really important, really for all parties involved, to take photos, to get eyewitness testimony, things like that. So yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. We don't have a vulnerable user law in Illinois. Some states do, which automatically put that kind of burden of proof, if you will, on the motorist, because the cyclist or a pedestrian is a vulnerable user, but we don't have that. So that situation will differ depending on different states.
So it is very possible that the bicyclist could be legally liable for an accident, even though.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. All right, so taking the lane, this is another one of those. You got a 50-50 shot. Is what these gentlemen are doing, riding around this turn, kind of in the center of the lane, is this legal or is it not legal? Maybe just go ahead and use the chat again. Give us your... BL, I can find that information for you about the vulnerable users. I know League of American Bicyclists has that. All right. So
this picture, what are they doing? They're just taking the corner in the middle of the lane. Okay.
Yes. So it looks like we have a kind of a mix. Sorry, I can't think and write down things at the same time. You have a mix here, and actually, so what these gentlemen are doing, it is legal. So cyclists can take the lane if the lane is not wide enough for a motorist to pass with at least 3 feet of space between the motorist and the cyclist. So that is meant to be a temporary maneuver, and especially around this turn here. Imagine if a car or a motorist tried to sneak by these guys, right? All sorts of bad things can happen. The car can hit the curb, causing damage to the car, could hit one of the cyclists. So the idea here, by taking the lane, and these guys are no more than 2 abreast. If this guy was out here, maybe you could argue it's not legal, but by taking the lane in this situation, completing the turn, and then going back to the right third of the lane, if you will, or the right tire track, that's the safest way for a cyclist to maneuver that. That does cause a slight, delay for the motorists. There's no denying that. But in the end, the idea is that everybody gets to their destination safely. I want to show you, this is one of our videos here, and let me know, Nancy, let's see, is this showing the taking the lane? window, or is it still showing a presentation?
It's showing the presentation.
Okay, so give me just a second here. Here we go. All right, how about now?
Yep, we're good now.
It is showing the right.
It's got the screen. Yep, yeah.
All right, so this is one of the ads that Ride Illinois has been sharing on social media. And, you know, the sound may not be critical, but I'll just play this real quick. And yes, that's me. All right, so you get the idea. So, you know, that's actually right near Bussy Woods, and there are curbs on either side, and there's just absolutely no way for a cyclist and a motorist or a bike and a car to fit through that at the same time. So the curb does end shortly after the video ends, and then I would get back into the right third of the lane. So yes, does that slow the motorist down? It does. Again, no denying. I recommend that when I teach that maneuver to cyclists that they wave or thank the motorist that's patient that waits behind them. Okay. The alternative is that the cyclist maybe hugs the shoulder, and then maybe a motorist sneaks by. But again, bad things can happen. But know that the intent there is not to anger the motorists. It's to safely get through that stretch and then move on down the road. All right, so just some reasons why a cyclist might take the lane, right? So safety is the number one reason. Again, cyclists won't do it to anger motorists. Perhaps we're preparing for a left-hand turn, which you're not going to be able to make from the right third of a lane, and to prevent being buzzed or sideswiped. And then the comment about sidewalks, I will say, I was telling Nancy that there's some really colorful comments out there. That tends to be a lot of the reaction is, well, just get on the sidewalk. Sidewalks are not meant for cyclists. They're not meant for bicycles, they're meant for pedestrians. And so if you go back to one of the first slides where bicycles are vehicles in Illinois, bicycles and bicyclists should be on the road. Okay. It's BL, I see your comment. It's not illegal to ride on sidewalks from a state law standpoint. There could be local ordinances that say you can't ride on sidewalks. But if you're to ride on a sidewalk and encounter a pedestrian, the way the law is written is you're supposed to dismount your bike and allow that pedestrian to pass and then jump back on. So really what will happen, again, from a legal standpoint, is if there is some sort of collision or crash in that situation, the cyclist is going to be more often than not at fault. So yeah, it's not illegal to ride on sidewalks. All right, so moving on, that's our take the lane. Hang on, let me make sure. There we go. All right, so this is yet another one. Hang on, I may have gone. No, okay. All right, so here's a situation, kind of an open country road, a decent shoulder, and you got two gentlemen riding side by side, legal or not legal? All right, we've got a lot of folks are saying it's legal. And yes, that is the case. So in Illinois, riding two abreast is permitted. And this is, I'm reading from the Illinois Vehicle Code, as long as the normal and reasonable movement of traffic is not impeded. So again, that's up for interpretation. Know that riding more than two abreast is clearly illegal, but the normal and reasonable movement, that's up to the cyclists. They need to be aware of that. If there is a line of traffic building behind these guys, they need to find a safe space, and maybe it's over here with this little driveway, to pull over and let that, that pressure or all the buildup release, and then hop back on the road. So it's a bit of a gray area because normal and reasonable may differ between police officers, for example. But know that it is permitted. And think of it this way, even if it's this one guy riding, and if he's out kind of where he's at, I would suggest he actually get a little bit further out in the lane and his friend's not with him, you know, it really doesn't change the situation. There still may not be enough space to pass safely in the same lane. So.
And this would be one of those situations where even if that's a double yellow line, a car
Yep.
is allowed to go across it to pass them.
Correct. Right? Yeah, and this is a great situation too because there's a nice sight line, so motors can quickly get past a cyclist and you know, do so safely and not take any chances. So just more examples. You know, we see it, over the course of the winter. You know, when you're sitting in your car, just take a look at the gutter and how much junk and debris, and I mean, you got to wonder, like, why is that giant bolt sitting there? And shouldn't the vehicle that had that, wasn't that important, right? So there's a lot of debris that's there. So that's not a safe place for a cyclist to ride. So a cyclist may move out into the lane and take the lane for that case. Mentioned the lane width earlier. That's certainly important. A substandard or a narrow lane, taking the lane is really the only maneuver. Visibility. If you're in the middle of the lane, you're more visible as a cyclist than you are hugging the curb. And then the example we showed early on about the door zone. So if there's a lot of parked cars, the door zone is just the space where when the motorist opens their door, you know, the distance that it'll extend into the lane. And so you can imagine a cyclist hitting a stationary door from a car is not a good thing. And again, it's not done to anger motorists. All right, another scenario to run through here. And this is, you know, this is maybe more higher stakes, right? So now we're talking a US highway and an overpass. So the cyclist here is traveling in the right direction. I'm sorry, in the right, right direction, is traveling with the traffic. The motorist, in this case, is some sort of truck, right, is traveling the same direction. If the motorist passes the bicyclist on the bridge, he's going to make sure that there's enough space. But we don't see, the idea is that now there's a motorist coming this direction. So it forced the truck to fall back in line behind the cyclist. Again, slowing the driver of the truck down momentarily, potentially, you know, causing a little frustration. But in the end, everyone was, oh, actually, no, I take that back. So motorists collided with the cyclist. Yeah, sorry, I missed that. So in this situation, I'm curious if there's any thoughts. Does this, either as a motorist or a cyclist, you know, this situation here with interstates and off ramps and potentially high speeds and lots going on, you know, that might be a scary situation no matter where you're riding or driving. So I don't know if there's any emotions or thoughts that come to mind, but according to Matt,
that's one of those things personally that would, you know, limit my riding a lot. You know, like I would be planning my routes, so I avoided situations like this.
Yeah, and again, this is Fort Collins, so it's a little more open, maybe not as many options, right? Matt, I appreciate your comments. I also know that you were just riding like Irving Park Road around the airport, so you're pretty hardcore. All right, so in this case, yeah, the cyclist could have taken the lane, right? We're talking higher speeds. So what that means for a cyclist is they need to be more deliberate. They need to take the lane sooner. Unfortunately, whether it's a real example or not, it looks like potentially the cyclist was killed, which is why there's this ghost bike here. The motorist, you know, could simply have waited, right? So the chances are the cyclist would take that lane across that entire overpass and then move back into the right third of the lane. So again, both parties involved could have done something different. And, you know, one thing to keep in mind too, you know, it seems like vehicles are getting bigger and bigger every year. So if it's a truck and it has, you know, the kind of wide mirrors, you know, as a motorist, you have to kind of know the footprint of your vehicle and how much space you're going to need to give to pass a cyclist.
Yeah, the comment on that BL is making that is illegal. It was legal for the bike to be on that road. It's not
Yeah.
a highway, so as long
Right.
as it's not a highway, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, especially out west, there's places where cyclists can ride on interstates, just because that's the only way to get from point A to point B. Um, Assume that the shoulders are wide enough that you're not actually in the travel lane. But yeah, I mean, unless it's a limited access highway, a cyclist can use that. Just, you know, you need to be a little more, little safer in your maneuvers. And then as motorists, you know, you just need to be a little more patient and know that with higher speeds, worse things, the end result could be worse. Door zones we mentioned earlier. Really, this graphics is just showing, you know, cyclists oftentimes like to be magnets to the curb. So a cyclist may see, hey, there's a couple open parking spaces, so I'm going to kind of swerve in there, but then swerve back out. And by that time, this purple car is like right on top of the cyclist, and again, bad things can happen. So what we teach cyclists is hold your line, you know, ride outside the door zone, and then just ride in a nice straight line. Again, to be predictable. So it's just another example of where a little patience, you know, a little communication, a wave or a thank you as a cyclist goes a long way. And of course, you know, a motorist who is patient and willing to, you know, just kind of slow down a bit too is appreciated as well. This isn't the greatest image, but what I'm highlighting, I think you guys can see, I'm loving this little red dot. Can you see this, Nancy?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So this is the bike lane, and it's adjacent to a parking lane here. So door zones, in this case, every door that opens is going to open up into the door zone. So it may be that a cyclist is going to ride far to the left of the bike lane or even into the lane of traffic, the through lane. So again, that's to avoid the door zone. It's not to make anybody angry. So here's a tip for motorists. The Dutch Reach, which is actually now on the Illinois motorists, the driver's quiz, the driver's test. The idea behind the Dutch Reach is that you open your door with your right hand. So this is popular, you know, in the Netherlands. So what that does is when you reach over, it helps you to see by looking in your mirror, your side view mirror, if someone's coming. So it's just something most of us have to kind of teach ourselves how to use this maneuver, because we really haven't thought of it that way. But it's just one way to avoid just clearly, you know, just quickly opening your door with your left hand and not looking behind. So hopefully we're going to see more and more that that's a kind of a knee-jerk reaction with motorists, and it'll result in fewer dooring crashes. All right, another example here. This is oftentimes called the left cross. So a cyclist coming up to an intersection, and the motorists misinterprets the speed, and there's a crash right there in the intersection. So another spot where a little patience can go a long way. And because I mentioned earlier, now we're it's a collision from different directions, that the overall force is greater, and so there does tend to be result in more serious injuries.
Can I give full disclosure here?
Yeah, sure.
I had this situation happen to me the other day. Actually, this situation happened the other day. I was the motorist and was doing the turn on a yellow light.
Okay.
So I was, wanting to get my turn made before the light turned red, and didn't see the bike that was coming there because he was all dressed in black.
Yeah.
So I was like focusing on the, getting my turn made.
Right.
And he it wasn't a collision, but it was a potential collision. And so he kind of gave me, some nasty signals. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm like, just quickly say, I did not see you at all. So I'm not saying that was his fault for wearing black. That was totally my fault, but.
Right. But let's say what if he entered the intersection after it turned red? Like legally, he'd be at fault. But if you hit him, you'd feel terrible, right? So that's where, as a motorist, just taking that extra second, or being aware of the potential, right, is really important. So thank you for your honesty. All right, so avoiding the left cross. So again, just some tips. We want to just be aware. The more you drive around cyclists, the more aware you become, and the more and there are studies that show the more you ride, the safer motorist you become. Just because your perception of and your just picking up your surroundings, you're just more sensitive to it. I would just call out on this one. This is important here. If a cyclist is close to this, looks like a cab here, but it's a minivan or a van, and there's traffic, oncoming traffic, maybe wanting to make a turn, teach cyclists to stay a little bit further back so they're more visible. So that's the shadow of the vehicle that we just need to be conscious of. So there, again, two things: cyclists can position themselves in a better spot, and motorists can just be just kind of on the lookout for that. Yes, and Matt, definitely take the lane through just about every intersection. You want to take the lane to discourage, as a cyclist, you want to take the lane to discourage others' mistakes. All right, another one here. So this, again, is a double yellow. You've got cyclists this time in the shoulder, because it's a nice wide shoulder. These two drivers are giving plenty of space. But it's a double yellow. So is this illegal in Illinois? Is this legal or not? Maybe just a couple comments. Yep. So Molly's saying legal. Anyone else want to chime in? Legal. Yes. BL, it is legal. Yep. Again, in Illinois, right? The way the law is written is if the bicyclists are traveling at less than half the speed, so you could see where maybe where the lawyers might come into play, right? But in general, yes, it's legal. This I would much rather see this than these motorists, passing in the passing lane. They're certainly being courteous there. And it's also legal because the cyclists are on the shoulder. That's legal in Illinois as well. All right. Yep, legal. All right, so just some tips. Again, you are a motorist, and some tips for passing the cyclists. This is the example we just discussed. Cross the double yellow. There's oncoming traffic. This is where patience comes into play. As a cyclist, I try to gauge kind of the reaction to motorists after they pass. If they have to slow down, do they gun their engine, or they just kind of go on their way? You kind of get a sense of what the reaction was there. And then as far as, when you're driving, wait till you get to see the bicyclist in your rear view mirror before pulling over. If it's a breezy day and someone's out on their road bike and maybe you're going downhill, cyclists can move pretty quick. So you want to give a little extra time before returning to your lane as a motorist, just to avoid any issues or collisions. All right. All right. So here we talked about the right hook earlier. And I tell you, this is another one that just based on our very unscientific Facebook ads really irks people. So the idea here is that the cyclist is traveling through the intersection and the motorist wants to make a right turn. Okay. As a cyclist, I've learned to kind of listen for if the engine starts to rev, right? Is this motorist going to try to beat me to this intersection? So that's something as a cyclist you can do. And if you have a mirror, I have a mirror on my helmet so I can look back and see as well. But the idea here is, as a motorist, just let that cyclist get through the intersection before making your turn. I'll show another. I'm actually kind of proud of our ads, so show another one of our ads that are running right now. That's for the right hook. Let me just find it here. And oh, not that. Sorry, give me just a sec here.
These ads just started running when?
They started running April 23rd. And I mentioned to folks earlier, to Nancy, that it's crazy. The ads have had over 50,000 views. So it's pretty impressive that the reach that they're having. All right, so Nancy, can you see?
Yep. Uh-huh.
Right, so this is going to be, so that's me again riding, and Sarah's driving, Emma's filming.
Contrary to what you might believe, cyclists move faster than you think. When you're driving, make sure to avoid the right hook. To be safe on the road, click below to take our motorist quiz.
So, it's staged, but, you can see where, a motorist is really trying to beat the cyclist to the punch there, right? And so we want to try to avoid that as much as possible. All right, just a couple more here.
That's the personal, I know 2 people who had that accident.
Yeah.
And went tumbling over the car's hoods.
And there's a maneuver that we teach in smart cycling classes that can help lessen the impact. But if a cyclist is unsuspecting and that happens, there's really no time to react. So again, intersections, it can be a dangerous spot. So let's avoid the right hook by the cyclist can take the lane, forcing that motorist to slow down. Some will still take exception and, go way around you, but that's the exception and not the rule. Looking for cyclists approaching from behind as well. So maybe you're stopped at a light and, it could even be a bike lane and a cyclist is coming through. So, and you're going to try to make that turn still. So, intersections, just kind of a dangerous spot for all traffic. And, really you want to avoid overtaking the cyclist. Let's just let the cyclist go through and then safely make the turn. All right, so in this example, same 2 guys, boy, they get around. So they're hugging the line here.
Oh, Dave, wait, we're still seeing your video screen.
Oh, sorry. Oh, new share. There we go. Thank you. Now you seen it?
Yep.
Our 2 friends. Okay. So they are riding, hugging the line. The motorist doesn't want to pass the double yellow. So legal or not legal? Not legal. Yep. Yeah, that's right. There's a couple things. Again, the cyclists maybe could ride in the shoulder, though it does look like there's some gravel here. And on what appears to be some skinny road tires, they may not want to ride through that. Might not be safe. So a motorist should either pass, with plenty of clearance, or slow down and wait till maybe the cyclists get back into the shoulder. So yeah, we want to avoid that situation. All right, just again, a few more tips. The one I want to call out here is wind blasts. So as motorists know that, when passing a semi, especially like passing the opposite direction, there's that wind blast, right? You feel it in your car. You have to hang on because there's a blast of wind, and you might be in a 2,000-pound car. Well, a wind blast can have quite an effect on the cyclist. So just be aware of that when you're out riding. You might see some cyclists on the road. You want to give a little extra space, because even in a small car, it could cause a wind blast. And then blind spots. We all have blind spots on in our vehicles. We have actually one more video, and I think this is one of my favorite ones. It actually pertains to trucks, but the idea of the no zone. So where a cyclist, shouldn't be riding. And so, yeah, I'm just going to play this one real quick.
Wow. That's ineffective.
Yeah, and
So
that was done a couple of years back. We actually include that in the bike safety quiz, but that kind of over accentuates, right, or overemphasizes. But there is every vehicle is going to have some blind spots. All right, just a couple more things to run through here. Groups of cyclists. This is another one that tends to raise a motorist's blood pressure. But if it's a race or an invitational, oftentimes you're going to have cyclists riding certainly more than 2 abreast here. Hopefully, there's some plans by local authorities to divert traffic, motorists onto another road. Not always going to be the case though. So, in this case, there's something again that the motorists can do as well as the cyclists. The motorists are going to have to be patient and maybe just tap a horn if need be. And cyclists should really get no more than 2 up. So this is oftentimes kind of the worst case scenario because there's just so many cyclists and not a lot of space for them to. But there's enough space to share, but to string out 2 abreast ends up taking up quite a bit of space. Just some other situations which would limit the visibility of motorists. Distracted driving, of course, I think we're all familiar with. It's not being something wise to do. The sun glare and the fog, I still, you hear it on the traffic reports, typically this time of year, the sunshine delays going into the city, right? The same idea, right? If you see this out of your car window, you're going to slow down because you may not see vehicles in front of you. Well, that's also a time where you need to be slowing down in order to make sure there's no cyclists in front of you as well. Fog, that's obvious. The illegal courtesy. So this is something that most cyclists encounter, and I would encourage motorists to not do. So what that means is, when, let's say there's just a 4-way stop, it's kind of a simple situation, and a motorist gets there first, and then the cyclist gets there, and then the motorists will wave the cyclist through. That's nice, right? If there's other people at that 4-way stop, it's just going to cause confusion. So the recommendation is just, treat the situation as you would any situation if there were other vehicles there. Illegal courtesy. So Matthew, that's when a motorist will wave a cyclist through an intersection. The example is that like a 4-way stop sign. Encourage motorists to not do that. It's first come, first serve. So let's just treat it that way. And yes, I know that a lot of cyclists are going to blow through the stop signs. That's something that, we don't, Ride Illinois, Friends of Cycling, we do not encourage people to do. That's part of our education outreach is to let cyclists know that they have to follow the same, as BL says, same rights, same rules. So it's an unfortunate situation, and hopefully we'll be able to make a dent on that over time. All right, and then just a couple quick notes about what we teach cyclists. I think we touched on a lot of this, some of this already. So, first come, first serve. We just talked about that. Obeying signs and signals, being visible and predictable, communicating. The whole idea is, kind of be defensive, knowing that you're on a relatively small vehicle, and the end result, if there's a crash, is going to be worse than if you're in a car. So those are some core principles we teach in the smart cycling classes. And then hand signals and communication in general. This means a whole lot. If a cyclist communicates with a hand signal, as a motorist, you're going to appreciate that. If a cyclist just kind of turns in front of you and doesn't give that hand signal, you're not going to appreciate that. So, we're trying to come at it from both directions. And so if you wanted to learn more, Ride Illinois BikeSafetyQuiz.com. It is the only, to our knowledge, and the only tool of its kind in the country right now. And so it was developed by Ride Illinois, and it adheres to all the Illinois traffic laws. As you can see, there's multiple modules as well. Got the big yellow arrow pointing to the motorist and driver's ed quiz. If you're a cyclist, you can take the adult cyclist and the motorist quiz. if you're not a cyclist, but you want to be safer around, if you're a motorist and you want to be safer around cyclists, take the driver's ed quiz. These are all, all free. You're not going to get spammed as a result. And I guarantee you're going to learn something. So you just have one example. And Nancy, this would be the other poll question.
Okay.
One example question from, this is from the motorist quiz, from Bike Safety Quiz. So a motorist approaches a red light where only a bicyclist is waiting. So these are just two different scenarios here. As a motorist, where do you wait? Are you motorist number one here, fairly far back from the cyclist? Or are you motorist number two, not on top of the cyclist, but a little bit closer? So if you could launch that poll.
All right. There we go. Oops, hold on a second. Okay.
Yeah, so if you all wouldn't mind just chiming in, there should be the poll that you can answer now. And the point of sharing this particular question is kind of the thought-provoking nature to it. How are we doing on input, Nancy?
We had 8 out of 12, so a few more people to vote. 10 out of 12.
That's probably enough.
Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll now.
All right.
And here was where we ended up.
Oh, okay, interesting. All right, so again, the point of this question was just to introduce the idea that the questions on the quiz are going to get you thinking. So the fact that we're 50-50 on this one, the correct answer is actually number 2 here, closer to the cyclist. So number 1 is very common, and this is a very courteous motorist who doesn't want to crowd the cyclist, wants to give plenty of space, doesn't want to appear intimidating. Number 2, again, is not on top of the cyclist. There's some space between there, but by being closer to the cyclist, there's a greater likelihood that whether there's a sensor on top of the street light or the traffic signal would pick up the car, or oftentimes you can sometimes see them. They're called loop detectors that are in the concrete or in the asphalt, or sometimes they're buried underneath. But by the motorist being closer to the cyclist is going to increase the chances of tripping that light for both the motorist and the cyclist. So yeah, so the correct answer in that case is number 2. So again, it's just a teaser. There's plenty of other good questions on there. So just to kind of wrap up here, a few takeaways. And number 1, I think first and foremost, is that the folks that you encounter when you're out on the road, whether you're driving, whether you're riding, whether you're walking, we're all people, right? And we have to keep that in mind. Yes, there are things that people doing, different modes, they might do things that are frustrating, but in the end, we're all people. We can all get along, and we need to treat each other humanely. By treating a bicyclist as a driver of a vehicle or a bicycle as a vehicle, that can help kind of give perspective when, as a motorist, you're out there and you encounter a cyclist. So they may do things that you don't think are necessarily correct, but if the cyclist is doing what's correct, they're kind of keeping everybody safe in that regard. Both road users, we want to avoid crashes. Again, nobody wants to be in a crash, so let's keep that in mind, and hopefully picked up a couple tips tonight about avoiding crashes. Again, intersections, very, very dangerous place. Statistically, there's a lot of crashes that happen there. For those that said that they hadn't heard the term taking lane, hopefully that makes a little more sense. Again, just not only the term, but the reason why cyclists may do that. The 3-foot rule, I would say 3+. Obviously, you can give a little bit more. That's particularly important. There was one example I saw. Folks may have seen it on social media, where they showed the example of a person waiting for a commuter train. So picture a metro train, and they show the yellow strip where you're supposed to avoid, right? And so even if you stand just outside that yellow strip, and let's say it's 3 feet, when a metro train flies by at 50, 60 miles an hour, it's pretty scary. So it's kind of the same idea. If a cyclist is going 15 miles an hour and a car is going 65, it can be scary to a cyclist. And even if you cause a cyclist to crash after the fact because of, being intimidating or too close, a motorist can be found at fault. Do complete the motorist quiz. Again, it's free. Please share that with others. We're getting quite a few people taking the quiz now, in part because of our ads, in part because of the time of year. And let's all do our part to make our roads a little bit safer, slow down a little bit, and just be a little more patient when around others.
Dave, someone asked, couldn't this be implemented as part of the Illinois driver's test? And I mean, like this whole module for like learning, is that ever?
So Ride Illinois, and I don't take credit for this, but Ed Barsati has done quite a bit of work with the Secretary of State. There have been some questions added. So the right hook, I'm sorry, not the right hook, the Dutch reach, for example, was one that was added. There's the 3-foot passing. There are a sprinkling of questions that are on the driver's test. And could more be added? Absolutely. And should more, it's something that we'll continue to talk to them about. As cycling becomes, the statistics are showing it's becoming a more popular way for people to get around for transportation. That's only going to help to validate the effort and the need to, really modernize that test. So yeah, BL, that's the hope, is we can get more information on that driver's test. In the meantime, we've got, the motorist quiz and bike safety quiz. So we're hoping to fill the gap that way. And with
you guys posted on your Friends of Cycling in Elk Grove page an article about how in this current coronavirus pandemic that bikes have become the new toilet paper, and that there's so much demand, can't get your hands on a bike. So we'll see a lot more on the road.
I know Sarah was trying to shop at the local bike shop the other day at 7 Mile. They said they're very low on stock. I made a stop at Target today and just happened to notice they didn't have any bikes. So yeah, there's a kind of a renewed interest. And so then from a motorist standpoint, you're probably going to encounter, some fairly new cyclists. So, it could cause even more dangerous situations. But at the same time, if motorists are just kind of aware of what they might encounter and are a little bit patient, we can help avoid the headlines. So just kind of wrapping up here, again, thanks to the Elk Grove Public Library. Great content from the League of American Bicyclists. You can check out their website at bikeleague.org, and then hopefully you can see the Ride Illinois, Friends of Cycling, and then the public library websites as well. And with that, I think we had this plan to go a little bit beyond 8. So happy to take any questions or comments. CBL, new cyclists, right? And so they're novices, and we want to encourage folks to ride more, right? And if you're a seasoned cyclist and you can help someone to learn some new tips, please do, right? I mean, the more people on the road, more cyclists on the road, there's safety in numbers, just because there's a greater likelihood that a motorist is going to expect to see a cyclist. So yeah, let's kind of, be welcoming and foster some goodwill with the new cyclists.
So this, the bike quiz is something that we could all kind of promote on our own Facebook.
Sure. Yeah. And it's very easily duplicated and customized. So for example, if Elk Grove, that's something I've spoken with folks in the village before, if we wanted to have a specific copy of the quiz for Elk Grove, just to see how many people took it, or to use it to then offer a raffle prize or something like that, we'll slap the Elk Grove logo on it, call it Bike Safety Quiz for Elk Grove, and send the link out. And then it's a Google form, so it's very easy to see the results of people that take it. So yeah, so if you know, in your community, or it could be a workplace, you know, if you want custom quizzes, absolutely, we can make that happen. All right, Matthew's got a comment on riding. I saw a number of people riding the wrong way. I wanted to say something. I know it's tough, right? I've done that, Matthew, and I said, and it's like I try to choose my words. Like I was like, you know, it's just dangerous, right? And you don't know how someone's going to react. So maybe, you know, take a softer approach and just say, hey, you know, I saw you riding against traffic. You know, it's really a dangerous thing to do. And some are going to say, you know, I've been doing this all my life, I'm fine. But maybe you'll change someone's mind. Yeah, don't want to go into long winded. You want to talk physics and all that?
It's very intuitive. They think that I can see better, and yeah.
Right. Well, because people have commented on our Facebook ads, like, no, I'm taught to walk against traffic, and you know, and again, people have different thoughts. I walk against traffic, but I run with, and I ride with, or I walk and run against. So you know, it's just different schools of thought out there. When it comes down to the physics of a crash, and visibility and predictability, that should be enough to win someone over. But it's tough. You don't always know. Let's see. So Kelly, publicity for Elmer's Bike Club and shared a quiz. Thank you, Kelly. Yeah, you know, so one thing I'll look to see, we don't collect a lot of information on the quiz. You know, that's an intentional thing. We don't want to, you know, we get enough spam email and that, but we do have some Google Analytics that I'll jot that down, Kelly, and see if we can get some of that information. But if the Elmer's Bike Club if you want your own quiz that you guys can promote, it's all the same content. We'd be happy to do that for you. Let's see, and then Tammy, brand of helmet. Any helmet that is certified by the Consumer Product Safety Commission, so CPSC or ANSI certified, it's going to work fine in a crash. I don't purchase particularly expensive helmets. The more expensive they are, they tend to look a little cooler. They might be a little narrower, more ventilation. But yeah, as long as it's certified, look for that sticker on the inside. And pretty much any helmet you're going to find nowadays should have that certification. Let's see, we could solicit bike shops to share info on the quiz. So Ride Illinois did just send packets to every bike shop in the state with our ride guide and some bike safety quiz cards. So I would say, BL, if you go to a shop and they don't have any, let us know, because that means either they didn't put them out or maybe they ran out, which happens oftentimes. We have stock. Or if you personally wanted some, you know, I'm happy to mail them out and you know, have ambassadors out there helping with the quiz. Let's see, other questions? I don't think so. We just have Matthew's going to draw diagrams for us. All right, BL, I'll hit you up. I'll send you some cards.
And so May is National Bike Month, and hopefully everyone's getting out to enjoy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and just on that note, maybe just a final point here. Ride Illinois, we did put out some, let me find it here. We were getting a lot of questions from our members and from some bike clubs and things like that about, you know, what are our recommendations when it comes to, you know, biking group rides and the like. Let's see, I have to find it, sorry. And so on our website, we added this the other day. I think this is the one I want to share. So are you seeing the ride and event calendar?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we spent some time looking at Governor Pritzker's Restore Illinois plan and the 5 phases. And so I don't know if you can see, this is at rideillinois.org events/calendar. These were our suggestions for riding in the various phases of the Restore Illinois plan. Right now, the entire state is in phase 2. So what Ride Illinois is recommending, either go on solo rides or rides with other household members. And this is, to limit the spread of the coronavirus. When we get to phase 3, and different parts of the state, Molly down in Carbondale may get to phase 3, probably will get to phase 3 sooner than some of us up in the Northeast part of the state. So then the recommendation, again, it's based on the Illinois Department of Public Health and Governor Pritzker's plan, is no more than 10 people. Face masks, which I know can be difficult when biking. What we're saying is whenever it's not possible for strict adherence to social distancing, that a mask should be worn. So, we didn't come up with this on our own. We looked at those plans and wanted to get something out there that people could kind of react to. And the response so far has been pretty, almost entirely positive. There's some folks that feel limited, but if the end goal is to slow the spread, we're going to point people here. So those of you that are in bike clubs or riding with groups, please do your best to adhere to these guidelines.
And your website here too, this is where you could find previous webinars that you can just watch anytime, correct?
Yeah. Is this showing? I don't know if it's switching or not.
Yeah, it did.
Okay. So yeah, so the webinar page. So, this was the one tonight. We're going to try a trivia night on Saturday. We'll see if we get enough people. It's just going to be kind of a fun thing to do with some Ride Illinois prizes. I think Molly is probably still on, but Molly is down in Carbondale, and she and our newest board member, Katie, are going to do a discussion about, why you should come down to Southern Illinois to ride. And having been down there a few months back, there's definitely some cool places to ride. And then the recordings all here, so you can see, I mentioned the bike law earlier, basic bike maintenance. This one was fascinating. Unfortunately, we couldn't record it because it's some proprietary information, but there are some resources, how the Dutch have integrated bike education into their school system. It's fascinating. If you're new to cycling, you can watch that one, Intro to Mountain Biking, Ride of Silence, and then these last 3 are pretty technical infrastructure sessions that Ed Barsati had led. So if you're looking to make an impact or get some new infrastructure in your community, those would be good sessions as well. So, and if you have a topic that you think others would be interested in, or if anyone would want to present on a particular topic, please let us know. We're definitely going to try to keep the webinars going, maybe not at the same pace, but we want to make sure we're giving people something to do. If you're fortunate enough to be able to work from home and that, so we'll try to keep it going.
Well, this is all a great resource. Just having all this information and educational tools available, because I really think for those who aren't enjoying biking now, I think it's really going to be a growing thing. So we're glad, and then we're really lucky to live in a community, not only, where we've had the impact of Friends of Cycling in Elk Grove, and you and all your advocacy for creating a more bike-friendly town. And so, and I know we're not alone in the state, but it's just great to have that.
Yeah, there's definitely some positive momentum when it comes to becoming more bike-friendly. So let's tap into that and see what we can do. All right, we'll get a recording of this that we can share. Maybe I'll put the links to the videos or the ads as well, if you want to share. But I appreciate everyone's your comments, your questions, the fact that you attended. Again, hopefully you learned something. Nancy, thank you for setting this up.
Thank you so much for your time and all your expertise.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Right.
Join us again. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.